We are kicking off the Adobe for Education Professional Development live session series. We have today joining us Adobe Product Manager Joan Lafferty. Works on the XD team, and she'll be helping us learn more about the product, watching a demo, and then discussing your educational context for how you teach website and mobile app design, and also prototyping in the classroom. I think, Michael, you as a student, this will also be relevant, learning new skills, and also be sort of learning proper workflows and just getting an orientation to the product and its application. I just want to say I'm a few house rules and introductions from us. I'm Remy Mansfield, and I'm a Education Programs Manager here at Adobe. You know, most of our professional development can be found on the Education Exchange, and I'm glad that you all joined us today for this session. Joan, I will, what I'll do is I'll actually share the screen so you can take the reins and share your presentation. I'll say as a house rule to orient everyone here, we will be taking questions throughout the presentation. So as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we have a questions pod. Feel free to put any questions, thoughts, comments that come to mind. I will be monitoring the Q&A, and Joan has graciously said that, you know, throughout the presentation, you know, she'll take questions and address comments as we go through. So really look at today as an interactive live session where, you know, you can react and ask questions, and we will bubble those up and have Joan respond.
Yep.
All right. Well,
and Remy, I can't see the questions while I'm presenting, so if you can just let me know if somebody does have a question, and then I can pause and make sure that that gets answered.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me share my presentation. All right, oops. Go back. All right, so first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this morning. I don't know, it's probably not quite morning for everybody. It is for us here on the West Coast. I'm in San Francisco right now, actually just a little south of San Francisco, not in the office. So my name is Joan Lafferty. I am one of the product managers on Adobe Experience Design. We've been working on the tool for probably a little under 2 years. Maybe a couple of people did early experimentation, but heavy development's probably been going on for something about a year. So first thing, I just want to make sure that you all know sort of the vision behind our product. In Creative Cloud, you'll find it as Adobe Experience Design. I'm going to refer to it as Adobe XD because it's sort of the shortcut that we've all been using, and you might hear it kind of interchange those two names. So the vision behind Adobe XD is that it is a quick way that you will be able to design your screens, prototype them, so you can create an interactive prototype between your static screens, and then you'll also be able to share that with somebody via a public link to quickly get feedback. And then you can sort of keep on going with that cycle over and over again until you complete a design. So let's step back just a moment and discuss sort of why Adobe decided to build Adobe XD. So we talk to a lot of customers, and we're always sort of exploring what areas the company should go into. And in doing that, we discovered that with the UX design community, those of you who have been building screens for some time, they end up using kind of a lot of different tools. You're going from one tool maybe for wireframing, you might use a different visual design tool for actual like high fidelity designs or even your low fidelity designs, and then maybe exporting out those screens to another program to do an interactive prototype, and possibly even another tool to collaborate and actually get feedback on that. And just this whole workflow is sort of limiting creativity. Every time you switch from one tool to another, it creates friction. You have to remember your password. You have to re-export screens. So all of those things kind of, you know, when you have already shared an interactive prototype with somebody and you discover, oh, it would be nice to see how this one change might work, but going back into your design tool and actually making a change, exporting out the screens, updating your prototype, sending it out again seems like a lot of work that sometimes as designers you end up not even wanting to go through that. So we're trying to solve that problem, remove some of that friction and kind of make things go faster, and you're allowed to experiment even more. And again, this is just really the need for speed and performance. I think we're all pretty busy in our days, but we want to do the best work as possible, and so we're trying to enable that. And so we came out with Adobe Experience Design. Some of you might remember that before this, about a year ago, we announced Project Comet, which is the same thing. So it was codenamed Project Comet back last year when we first announced it, and then we had a public preview of Adobe Experience Design, the final branding for this product, in March of this year, so March 14 to be exact. And then we've been coming out with monthly updates. So Adobe Experience Design CC preview is available in Creative Cloud now. You can download it. You can really use it on any Adobe account, so you could have a free account and be using the tool sort of as long as you want, because it is in this preview mode. And with these monthly updates, so we're trying to sort of add value to the tool every month, depending on sort of the feedback we're getting from the community, what we need to build, as well as just value that we know that people may want and are going to help in sort of creating that vision of making things faster and being able to design, prototype, and collaborate on your designs. And just to go over briefly how this sort of development of this product is a little bit different from other Adobe products we've worked on. Because we know that UX designers have always been sort of user testing, you build something or design something and then you get feedback on it and you go back and you kind of keep iterating on that idea until it feels right to the customer. That's exactly what we're trying to do with Adobe XD. And that's why we wanted to release it early enough. So we have our first public preview, and we did that because we feel like there's enough in the product that you can get, you know, your workflows done. You can use it for production work. But it's definitely early enough in the process where people can continue to sort of shape the future of this product. We have a huge, huge backlog of items that we would like to build and that people have asked us to build. And so we're using feedback from the community to tell us, to help us prioritize what those features are. And what I have on the screen here is some of those feedback mechanisms that we've been using. So we have a site called adobeXD.uservoice.com, and here we are collecting feature requests. People can vote on them. People file bugs here. We also have Adobe forums. We've gone out to do a lot of customer visits. We're doing live Facebook streams, Twitch. We've done a Ask Me Anything on Designer News to sort of just get the word out to the community that not just to use the tool, but to actually give us feedback on it. So as educators, hopefully as you guys start using it, you give us feedback and your students are also giving us feedback. So this is sort of a unique opportunity that they can shape, you know, the tool that hopefully they continue to use in the future for a long time for all of their work. All right, so that is it, sort of just background on the product itself, our vision, how we're building the tool. Are there any questions before I go into the demo of the tool? Let me check the Connect pod.
Yeah, it looks like no questions right now. I did put up the user voice link, so for anybody who is interested in pitching in some feedback, you've got a link there.
Yep. Yeah, I can show it here really briefly on the screen. So, and this is, I don't think any of our other products have something like this. Photoshop has feedback.photoshop.com. We decided to use user voice because it was really easy for people not just to enter feedback, but also to vote on feedback. So you can see, and we're also updating this as a product team to make sure that we're telling the community what we're working on. So you can see here, like scrollable areas, the feature is started. Some of these features are in our backlog, but they haven't been started. So like a layers panel. So you can sort of kind of follow the development of the tool. There's lots of comments that we go across, and we're also using this forum to sort of find users to actually give us feedback. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start XD. We also have a private pre-release. So while we have a public build that comes out every month, so I think we're on, so we had one in March, April, May, and then we just came out with one in June. We also have a private pre-release. So if there's any, and that has a bit of newer builds, so if anybody is really interested in providing sort of the earliest feedback, then I'm happy to add you to that. We have a few hundred people on that particular pre-release site. And also our June release was the first release that we came out with localized Mac builds for Japanese, German, and French as well. So I don't know if we had anybody from any of those locations that would be interested in that localized build. Right now we only have a Mac build, but if you actually check user voice, you can see that we are working on a Windows build. So that is coming for many of our customers, actually in education as well as government, and then certain countries around the world are still very heavily Windows users even within their design community. So that's coming. All right, so I have started Adobe Experience Design, and this is the first screen that you'll see. This is our welcome screen, and you can see that you can start a design from here. So depending on what screen you might be designing for, you click here, you can see all the different screens. So this will give you just an artboard template for a particular device that you might be targeting, or you can have an infinite canvas if you click this, or enter just a custom width and height for a particular artboard. My recommendation for getting started with the tool would be to click here on the sample file, and I have just clicked on that sample file, and you can see it's actually a step-by-step tutorial that gives you an introduction to changing color, so that will introduce you to our properties panel and how to use that. Creating a repeat grid, which I'll go over in a couple minutes, masking images, creating prototypes, previewing them, sharing online, and then finally exporting assets. So that is a step-by-step tutorial. It'll probably only take you or your students probably somewhere in the vicinity of 5 minutes and give you kind of an overview of the workflows in the tool that you can do. But it doesn't go as in-depth. It just kind of touches the surface of what you can do in XD. But I think it's a great start. All right. So first of all, I just want to introduce you to sort of the interface of the tool and what you see here. If you open a brand new document, you'll just get an infinite canvas. And then we have the standard tool. So it's pretty minimal because we're trying to provide you with just the tools that we believe that you will need. So you have a rectangle, you have a couple of different shapes. Then you have the pen tool, text, which supports both point text and area text, and then the artboard tool. So as I've clicked here on the artboard tool, and you can choose from all of these different devices. So if you choose iPhone 6, for example, then you'll get an artboard for the iPhone 6. And as you just click on the canvas, you'll get a new artboard in the size that you previously chose. You can also create a custom-sized artboard just by dragging and your cursor around to create an artboard of a custom size. And then you can change any of the properties of an artboard by selecting it, clicking on the name of that artboard, and then you can change the background color of that artboard. You can also add a grid to that artboard here in the panel. So I've clicked on a grid. The default is 8 pixels, so you'll have a grid every 8 pixels. You can also change the color of that grid depending on the color of your background. You probably want a grid that you can actually see. And then you can change the size of that as well. And then you can create a new default. So if 12 pixels is actually the default you're going to use, you can say make this default. And then as you apply it to a different artboard, you can say to use the default, and it's using the default that you created earlier. And so that is just a brief introduction into using our artboards in design mode. So we're going to start out here in design mode, and then we'll move on to prototyping and then sharing and export. I'm going to open up this first application here. And so here I have a couple of different artboards. You can sort of have as many artboards as you want. In the tool here, I might be working on some iPhone screens as well as tablet and web screens all in the same project. And then if I want to bring something into this tool, I'm actually going to take the grid off so that you can see better. You might want to bring assets in from another tool. So you can copy and paste really from most of our other tools. So here I am in Photoshop. Maybe you want this image. Maybe you've done some adjustments to this image in Photoshop. And then you can just select it. You can copy it if it's just a single layer, or do a copy merged if it's multiple layers. So I'm going to do a copy merged here, and then go into XD and just paste it in. And so now you have your image that came from Photoshop. Resize it down and put it in here. And then as you can see, as I move around, you can see that we have various measurements that show up as smart measurements. If you want additional measurements, you can click on the Alt or Option key on your Mac. So I'm going to click on that, and now whenever I hover over any item, you'll be able to see the measurements. So here I am clicking on Alt, and you can see the measurements between various objects that you have selected and that you're hovering over. And so again, you just click on the Alt key to be able to see those other measurements. And so now I've added this. I'm going to bring this to the back. So I have some of my other options there. And then another thing you can do, so I have copy and pasted bitmaps from Photoshop. And then you might want to copy and paste bitmaps that have been created in Illustrator. So here I am in Illustrator. I have maybe some icons that somebody has created. I'm going to take those and copy. And then I can paste those right, oops, and close that. I have multiple XDs running. So I will paste that into XD, and I have these vectors here. And so when I paste from Illustrator, these actually come in as vectors. So you can see that you can continue to change the fill of anything that comes in from Illustrator. You can also edit the particular anchor points and change that vector. And then, of course, you can change the size of that particular asset if you want to use it in your design as well. So again, you can copy and paste from both Photoshop or Illustrator. You can also copy and paste from Sketch. So I think it's not in our public build now to do a general Command-C, Command-V from Sketch. But if you want to, we do accept SVG off the clipboard. So the newest version of Sketch actually has, if you right-click, let me open it now. Okay, I don't know what sketch file I have. So if you do a right-click in Sketch, they have a copy to SVG option. And so if you do that copy to SVG option, you can paste that information directly into XD and get the vectors that you need from there. So it comes in as a vector. If you do a general copy and paste from Sketch with the public build we have now, you just get bitmaps. But in a future release, we are supporting vectors coming in from general copy and paste from Sketch. So we want to make it easy for people to get assets into XD from pretty much anywhere that you want. But we do have vector capability that you could draw your own icons from within XD. So let me show you that really quick. Actually, I drew this here. I'm going to extend this and redraw this sort of luggage icon here. So just to give you a little background on our pen tool. So the pen tool actually has most of the capability that we have in Illustrator. However, we're trying to simplify it for the user in that with Illustrator, you have sort of so many different pen tool options depending on what you need to do. You have the generic pen tool, you have a different tool for adding anchor points, deleting them, a different tool if you want to actually do a curve with the pen tool, and all of that is combined in the XD pen tool. So now I have the pen tool selected, and as I start to draw, it's dropping anchor points. I'm going to draw here on the grid itself, and then when you close it, then you're done. And then maybe I want to create it like this, clicking escape to get out of dropping of anchor points. And then now if I double click on any one of the anchor points, you actually get a curve, and so you can adjust that curve. And I am using my shift key so that it just moves vertically, but if I don't click on the shift key, then you can kind of move that and create any sort of curve that you want. And then if you want to actually add or delete anchor points, so the first click into an object will kind of give you the general bounding box, and you can change the size of that vector. If you double click in, then you actually have access to all of the anchor points that are on that particular vector object. So here, I can go along the path and add an anchor point there, so just by clicking, and then I can go ahead and move that if I want to. Or I can select an existing anchor point, click delete, and it actually deletes that anchor point. So you can add anchor points, delete anchor points, as well as use the curvature tool, sort of all from within the same pen tool in XD. So we're trying to simplify that process while giving you the same power of vector editing in XD.
Hey, Joan, a quick question from the Q&A pod here.
Yeah.
Does this app use layers?
So good question. So the initial vision of XD was that our lead designer didn't believe that we would need layers. As we've put the tool out, more and more people keep asking for layers. We've come upon various use cases where really you need your layers. And so we do have a plan. We're actually working on layers now, and they'll probably be released later this year. So the engineering team is working on layers now. We might do something a little bit different with our layers panel, which is what we're calling contextual layers, so that you only see the layers for a particular artboard that's selected, because that's generally where you're going to want to be working. So we're trying to get rid of the idea, not necessarily get rid of, but the unwieldy large layers panels that you might have in Photoshop, and try to clean that up and just give you the information that we believe you need. So I think that's how we're going to release layers in the first place and see what people think about it. Get their feedback. We may change direction, but yeah, so in the beginning, I think we're thinking that because it's so easy to actually select items in XD, so if you have something in a group, sort of the first click, you click on the group, and with the double click you get into particular elements there, then maybe you wouldn't need layers. But I think as these documents become more and more complex, we found that items end up getting hidden. If you don't have a layers panel, you can't necessarily find them. Sometimes you don't know where something sits sort of in the Z order, and so you're bringing things back to front multiple times, and it would be a lot easier to just kind of go through your layers panel. So to answer your question quickly, we will have layers, but we don't have them in the build that you're going to see that you can download from Creative Cloud. But it is one of the top priorities for our team right now. So we've got a few engineers working on implementing the layers panel.
Great, thanks, Joan.
All right.
Also, just to let folks know, I'll put in the chat the release notes link, which is probably, I imagine, another good place to visit just to keep an eye on what features are coming or what has been released recently.
Mm-hmm. And is that the What's New page that's on our marketing site, Jeremy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. So the other thing that we've seen that people are often doing, whether it's a web design or a screen design, is sort of repeating elements. For example, in a list, here you might be searching for some food item and then get a list of food. Normally how you would build this is you would create sort of that first item. I've now grouped it, and then maybe you would copy and paste and duplicate the items there. The problem with this is if you want to actually change the layout or play with something, then you have to do it for every single one of these items. And that didn't seem that definitely seemed like a workflow that we could improve. So we have created the repeat grid tool. So once you have something, so I've created a group here, I can make it into a repeat grid. And then now as I make this longer, it's automatically adding those items to my page. And so now I have 3 identical items. And you can, if you hover over the padding, you can adjust the padding of those items to what you want. And then for each of these items, if you change anything about a style, so I'm moving this around, so I'm changing the layout, it will change in every one of the items. So the same thing here, so you can change fonts, make that bigger, and then it changes in every one of the items. However, if you decide to change the text, because text is usually unique in each item, then that will change just for that particular item. So it didn't change any of these other items here. And then we also wanted to make it really simple for you to actually bring in data into here. So I have a bunch of images here. Let's see, some food images that I have. And so to quickly allow you to bring images into a large grid, you can select images from Finder and then just drag it in to wherever an image is supposed to be, and it automatically populates in there. And then we have a similar functionality for text where you can add in a text object, which I don't actually know that I have plain text. So it should be plain text. Let me grab some plain text here. So I don't have food, but I do have something like names. So if you have a plain text file, you can drag it in over a text element, and it will automatically populate with names. So in a real scenario, you'd probably have a list of food items. I only found a text file of names. But that's how it works. So in our repeat grid, you can repeat items. You can have all of the layout and graphical styles cascade to pretty much all of your elements, while text and images are unique to each particular item. And then you can bring in images and text easily by just dragging in images from Finder or dragging in a text file into any of your text elements, and it will populate automatically for you. And so where this is useful is also, for example, if you're working on a mobile layout versus an iPad one, you can take this repeat grid, copy it, and then maybe we'll go to our tablet layout here and paste that in. So in this layout, you'll probably actually have more of a 2-column layout, and so you can make that bigger, and then maybe you would have a smaller amount of space there, and then it's still populating with all of the different images that you put in before, and then you can go ahead and customize the names there, or this doesn't quite look right with the colors. So I will choose a different color. And this is where we sort of bring a little bit more fun into your design, where you can sort of play with all of these things, different colors, different styles, and see it cascade across, you know, your entire list, where if you had to copy and paste and duplicate items, you would be changing one of these, and then to actually see how it looks on every one of the items, then you would be changing every one, and that's kind of tedious and makes you not really want to experiment with different styles anymore. And here's a similar situation here, probably for this list of locations. You might also want to use a repeat grid. So that's how it would work there. All right.
Joan, we do have a question in the Q&A pod here. Does XD
Sure.
maintain link data to original files? So if the original picture is edited, XD will update automatically?
It does not right now. So it's just embedding whatever you added in there. So if you dropped in images, then it's sort of embedding that into the file in the workflow that I did here. We are going to have, by the end of the year, hopefully support for Creative Cloud libraries, and so there you will have linked assets. So the idea is that you'll have your library, and as you start adding items to your library that are used from within your file, then any changes to those library items will take effect in your file. And so those changes might come from Photoshop or Illustrator even. So if you have, say, 5 images that you have in your library, they're used in your XD file, somebody might change that library in Photoshop, and you'll automatically get the updates inside XD. And so that's where, if you know that assets are going to be changing, then you'll want to be sure to use a Creative Cloud library there. In this particular workflow, it's just a local workflow where we're embedding the images in the file. So if something changes, it won't change in your design.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. And then one quick thing about text that I don't think is always the most obvious. So with our text tool, if you have the text tool selected and you just click on the canvas, what you get is point text. And so if you resize that, it just resizes that entire piece of text. If you want area text, then you have the text tool selected and you click and drag the area where the text should live. And so there you will get area text that sort of overflows on its own, so, and crops itself. So not always obvious for first-time users, because they click on the text tool and then they assume that we actually only have support for point text, but we have area text as well. You just need to click and drag the area where you want the area text to live. All right, so now let's say you've actually completed your design, and then you can go into prototype mode. And so right up here on the top right is the preview. And so if you click that, you get a preview window where you can see your various screens. But right now, my screens are all static. So you can view your screens using your right and left arrows. You can just sort of slide through your screens. Or depending on if you have a screen selected, so if you're working on this first screen, for example, and you're moving things around, this is actually a live preview, so there's no updating. So if you feel like you want to preview your app the way it'll look here, you can use the screen for that. But you can also use the preview window for once you're deciding to create interactions. So here, nothing is interactive, but I'm going to make it so that when you decide to search for something, I'm going to take this handle here and then wire it to the second set location artboard. And so that gives me this. So now it's targeting here. I'm going to choose an animation for it to go to. Slide left sounds good. And so now when I click here, it'll actually go to that second screen. And maybe you're not so happy with that particular interaction. Maybe that actually seemed quite fast. Probably definitely doesn't show up over Connect that great. So I'm going to change this to be slower to 1 second. And now you can try it again. And it should have been slower. Let's see. I don't know if that shows up over Connect very well. You should see a much slower transition there between, yeah. All right, and then now we have these items are also not interactive, but you might want to link that up. So let's see, this looks like a search screen. I'm just going to take this. Sorry, I'm working on a very small screen here, so I have to move everything around. So again, anytime you want to, you choose something that you want to act as the click trigger, and then you just wire that up to whichever screen it's supposed to go to next, and then create your interaction. And then now you can preview it in the preview window. So that just dissolved over to the next screen. And so for the animations that are available here, the slide animations are generally good for mobile and tablet development. And then if you're doing web development, generally I think dissolved is probably the best thing to go for. Or you can actually have no transition. We don't have an option here to have no transition, but you can just set the duration of a transition to 0, and then you have no transition there. So it'll just be an immediate move to another page. So if you're doing something on the web and you just want to simulate, clicking on a particular link to go to another page, you're probably just going to have no transition there. And so you do that by setting the duration to 0. And then if you want to actually remove an interaction, so here you've decided that actually this, you just take this wire handle and kind of drag it into nowhere. And now this is not a transition, so I'll keep clicking here and nothing happens anymore. And so that is prototyping. And so once you have this actually available, let me just wire up a few things so that then I can share this prototype. I'll wire this to this screen. I'll take this item over to this screen. Then maybe this will go to this screen. So in the preview window, so if you have a design ready and you want a curated experience to share with somebody, then we actually have video capability here, so you can record a video of your prototype. So you just click there, and then you can show somebody how this particular animation is going to be. And then click here. And then when you're done, just click escape or click back on that record button. And then now you'll have a .mov file that you can send pretty much to anybody, which is a curated experience of the interactions that you've created. Or the other way that you can share with somebody is via our Share Online feature. Application V1. So with the Share Online, you can drag a file in here, which is just an image, maybe your logo for a particular application. Let me see if I have a logo. And so then you would click Create a Link. And what this is doing is taking your prototype and actually uploading it to Creative Cloud and using our services to create a public link for you. So here it's returned a public link. You can choose to click on that link and it will open up in the browser, or we also have embed code that you can take and embed it, say, in a Behance project or really any other website where you want to embed that prototype. I'm going to go here and go to that link and show you what that looks like. And so now this is the application that we were looking at. It has the logo that you selected for it. If you view this on a mobile device, so say you're looking at in Safari, then you'll see the screen, you know, without any of the rest of the background Chrome. And then if you add it to a home screen, it'll use this icon, so it'll look like a real application that if somebody wanted to show it to somebody, it's almost simulating an application on the phone. But here you can go through all of the same interactions that you created earlier. And then the nice thing about this is that if you got feedback from somebody after sending them that link, and then you needed to change something, for example, maybe they believed that this text was far too small, so they have you go ahead and change. And even that small change in another tool would cause you to export out a screen, maybe redo a prototype and reshare that. But here, if you make a small change, you can just update that same link. And then within, you know, a minute or so, I can reload that same link, and you'll see that change that I made immediately. So it makes for a lot quicker feedback. So if you're sharing a link with somebody, you can, you know, and they give you feedback over Slack or email, you can make that quick change super fast, update your prototype, and tell them, hey, you know, check out the same link. I've made your updates already. And so that happens, you know, a lot faster than if you were using multiple tools where you would have to have them work together, and kind of reduces that friction there. And from within this sharing screen, you can also view it in full screen mode. So if you're doing a presentation, then you can do it from there as well. And you can delete if you're the owner of this, you can delete the prototype from here. So this is a public link. So if, for example, you are done with your review and you don't want anybody to see it anymore, then you can delete it here from the web app. Or we also have a link to manage kind of all of your prototypes from there, and that is living on Creative Cloud, and it'll show you all of the prototypes that you've shared in the past. One thing I want to point out from this Share Online is that you have an option to update the same link or to create a new link. And so what happens, the use cases for this might be, so updating a link, it's sort of obvious. You share a link with somebody. You decide that you need to actually change something. You can change it and then update that same link. You might want to have a new link, for example, if you have two different versions of this application or two different flows, then you can create a new link and then send somebody those two links and say, here's my version 1 or here's my version 2, and then they can kind of give you feedback on two different links for the same prototype. And then you can manage all of your prototypes here, and you can delete them from here as well. So I have quite a few prototypes simply because I've been testing this for quite some time. Questions, Remy?
Joan, yeah, a couple of questions came in here.
Okay.
Going back to the text, piece, will there be support for
Mhm.
text on path?
Text on path.
Yeah.
No, we don't have support for that right now. I think the way if you did want to do something like that, you could probably do that in, say, Illustrator and then copy that in, and it would just come in as vectors. So fidelity-wise, you should be able to see that the same thing. So you're talking about like having text on a curve or things like that?
I believe, I think, well, I give Linda time to follow up with that question if it's the
Okay.
text on the curve. Lauren asks, is there a recommended minimum image resolution or dimension we should consider for raster images?
I don't think so. It's sort of dependent on what screen you're designing for. So here, these are iPhone 6 screens. So the artboard itself is 375 by 667 for that particular screen. And so when you export this out to share, we always display it at 1x. And so you'll always see, so we're not going to like stretch out your image. We might shrink it down if a screen is too small to see, but we're not going to stretch it out ever. So if it looks good on whatever you're designing in XD, then it should look fine, you know, on when it's shared online or anywhere else or in the videos, etc. Hope that makes sense. And then the last thing was exporting, and so you could have multiple ways. So I went up to File, Export. So if you have nothing selected, you can actually export all of your artboards, which I think is a pretty common use case that people have to do. You export all artboards. The default is, and you can also, so you can, if nothing is selected, you export all your artboards. If you have any particular item selected, for example, maybe you want to export that particular icon, then you export and you have the options for design, means it'll just get exported to 1x as a PNG. If you export for web, it'll be scaled at 1x and 2x. iOS is 1, 2, and 3x, and then Android, it will export to all of these various resolutions and then put it in the correct folder so it's kind of ready for handoff to an Android developer. And the options we have in our public build right now are just for PNG and SVG. And then in the future, we have support for PDF. That's coming up really soon. Probably in our July update, we'll have export to PDF as well. So if you, for example, want to export all of your artboards to PDF, then you can do something like that. Actually, I have things like slideshows that I end up doing now, and I export that to PDF. I think I interrupted. There might have been more questions. Were there more questions?
Sure. So just returning back to Linda's question about supporting text on a path, she was talking about text on a curve. I'm not sure if that affects your answer.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question, Linda. I think the best way to do that would be to do it in Illustrator and then just copy it and paste it into XD, and you should have, fidelity-wise, it should look fine just because it's going to come in as vectors. So each text element, I think, will come in as a vector.
Great. Thank you.
If that doesn't work, I should try it afterwards, but I think that's how it should work.
And just a shout out to everyone who's online with us right now. We are coming to the end, the last, let's see, 9 or 10 minutes here of today's live session with Joan Lafferty on XD. And please use the question pod above to share any thoughts, comments, reactions. I guess I'll, maybe continue the Q&A with a question about teaching for beginners. So have you seen people approach the teaching of XD in a particular way? Meaning you've showed us a template, you've showed us blank artboards. I know there are tutorials on the CC Learn. Is there some other way? How do you recommend, or what have you seen in terms of approaches of teaching beginners XD?
Of teaching beginners XD. So I would think that people can sort of follow the sample file itself, and you can create your own content, but just being sure to cover all of the items that are actually in that sample file. So the areas that we believe you should be teaching people is, go through kind of basic design, and then once you have a design, prototyping and wiring up screens, choosing a trigger, having it go to another screen and previewing that, and then sharing that online. And then just going through those 3 items, and then usually export, although export is pretty straightforward, but it's usually kind of the end of the process. Once somebody has completed a design, they're going to export assets or artboards for that design. So just covering those 4 areas, design, prototype, sharing, and export, I think, you can cover it to any extent that you want, but I think the sample file kind of gives you the basics there. The other thing that we definitely like people to go through is the repeat grid, which is why we have highlighted it in the sample file itself, because it is one of sort of the unique things about XD that makes designing a lot faster, and people will find more and more use cases for the repeat grid, whether it's just lists with images, just with text. I've used it before for creating like bulleted items in a slideshow. So just being sure to cover the repeat grid as well. And there's a lot in design mode that I haven't really covered, I think, fully. But a lot of it is similar to the way other tools might work. For example, things like masking, Boolean operations. So let me just give a sample of masking here. If I take a particular image, drag it into XD, and then have some kind of shape over it, then I would choose the shape as well as the image, and then mask it. And then if you double click, you can kind of edit around that image and then move that mask around. So things like masking are not always totally obvious to a beginner, but kind of something that probably should be mentioned, as I think people are going to use things like masking all the time. Also, a little bit more of an advanced feature that we do have in XD that I think you guys should know about, because it's a lot easier in our tool than other tools. So one thing that's really common in iOS development, for example, is having a background blur. So you might have a particular screen that you'll actually want to blur. So here I have my screen, and then I'm going to take a rectangle and put it over the original screen. And then here in the Properties Inspector, I'm going to click Background Blur. And so it takes the original image and blurs it, and then you can edit some of these properties depending on how much blur you might want, how much light and darkness you want there. And so this is pretty common in iOS development, and then usually somebody will have like a notification on top of sort of the blurred background and things like that. So just simulating this background blur is pretty difficult in other tools, while it's fairly straightforward in XD. Which that goes a little bit beyond your original question, but hopefully for educators, just going over design, prototype, sharing, and export is clear.
Definitely. Linda has a comment here. It appears that the students need to know basic Photoshop and Illustrator too for content to bring into XD. You'd agree with that, is that right?
I actually don't really agree with that. I think that you can get content into XD from anywhere. So, for example, with Photoshop, you can copy and paste bitmaps, but you don't have to. You can grab bitmaps sort of from anywhere. So if you are searching Google Images for, say, ice cream, and you want to bring, an image over from the web just to fill in a design, you can drag it and bring it over. The thing is that we don't have bitmap editing capabilities in XD, so if you need to change this image in any way, then you would have to go to some photo editing tool. Obviously, we would recommend Photoshop, but you can use iPhoto or anything like that. But you can bring in that content from anywhere. I mean, you could have these images in Finder, so you don't have to use Photoshop for anything. With regards to Illustrator, if you're just sort of doing basic, even not basic, you can draw all of your icons with the pen tool here, and I'm actually not much of an Illustrator user, so you can draw any of your content in XD, whether it's icons. A lot of screen design is just going to be, wireframing your boxes, circles, putting maybe those two together. We have Boolean operations. You can take those two. And so you can actually create a lot of different graphical elements just with these tools. So it looks like it's basic, but actually I think there's a lot that you can create from there. I'll actually show you that our team on XD has been doing all of our design in XD. If you look, for example, here, these are designs created for an Android app that we are creating to be a companion, and our designers work entirely in XD now. So all of these icons that they're creating are all created from within XD. And show you even some of these. So like these, if you see, these are actually quite complex designs, and they are all created in XD. I think our designers are actually not particularly Illustrator users. So yeah, no, I don't think that people would need Illustrator background. There are just some things that you might not be able to do in XD that we either don't have support for yet, or we don't really. So something like some of more advanced text features, I think that we plan on supporting more than we have now. It might just not be in the tool yet. Other things like bitmap editing capability, I don't think that we will add to XD, because we want you to, do that outside of the tool so that we can keep the tool lightweight. So we're trying to make it easy to go between other tools, but I think most of your work can really be done in XD, and it's simple enough that people don't necessarily have to be familiar with other design tools. I've met other product managers at Adobe who are actually using XD to, wireframe things and show workflows, because it is easier to use than, say Illustrator or Photoshop. You don't need a lot of experience going into it.
Well, that's certainly a vote of confidence there. Well, Joan, we're just reaching the top of the hour here.
Okay.
So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to you for a great presentation. I might point everyone who still has questions or feedback, please let's start a discussion on the Education Exchange. Also, I think to help Joan out and her team, do visit the User Voice website that I shared earlier in the chat, where you can give feedback and you can give feature requests. It sounds like the XD team is really looking to the community to drive and steer a lot of the development of this, and certainly as educators, you all have a unique perspective on exactly how you teach, what needs to be taught. And I just welcome all of you to give feedback and perspective. So thank you all for joining us today for our live session with Joan Lafferty on XD. And I do want to just take a couple minutes before you jump off the webinar. Let us know how you enjoyed it, and also look ahead to some upcoming professional development on the Education Exchange. So we have some links up here in the top left. And I'll say for our upcoming live events, we are doing another session this evening on XD with somebody else from another product manager from Joan's team. So you can learn more about that starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we also have a few upcoming MOOCs and massive open online courses that are free, part of our collaborative online course series. We have one Train the Trainer running through the summer. That's currently into week 2, but you can certainly sign up and catch up. And then we have a couple coming in the fall, so looking ahead to September. I also want to highlight a couple live events. In particular, August 25th is a career pathway alignment looking at CTE education, and also another one on flipped learning with Adobe, so using Adobe's tools to support flipped and blended learning methodologies and approaches in your teaching. Beyond that, visit us on edX, and please do share your resources and connect. Really excited to have you join us, and once again, thank you, Joan. This recording will be put on the Education Exchange. I look forward to seeing you at future events. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.